I wanted to give a big shout out to one of the guys that kind of defines the NHL when I think about how the league was when I was getting into everything back in the early 2010s-ish. You see, I only really started watching hockey in 2011, and I'll admit the Canucks being as good as they were back then was a big part of that, but when it came to this era of hockey, there were a lot of players that kind of defined the league to me. When I thought of good goal scorers, I thought of Daniel Sedin, I thought about Alex Ovechkin, I thought about Corey Perry. When it came to the guys that set these goal scorers up, of course, I thought about Henrik Sedin, I thought about Ryan Getzlaf, and I also thought about Nick Backstrom. A guy who today is 34 years old, and he is coming off a career where, the guy was an absolute stud. 1,000 points in 1,000 games, 747 assists, and even though he was never really a goal scorer, he didn't need to be. He got a few 20-goal years here and there, but he was a consistent 40, 50, 60 assist guy, setting up Alex Ovechkin left, right, and center, getting 100 points in 2010. He was, for all intents and purposes, the playmaker for Ovi. It's just unfortunate now because you saw Nick Backstrom get a surgery that puts himself in a very strange spot when projecting whether or not it is he's going to be able to return to the National Hockey League. It was about a week ago where he had this hip surgery, and according to the Sportsnet article, he is facing a lengthy recovery process. This is what Frank Saravelli said about Nick Backstrom. There is a long road ahead. Since Backstrom has hinted at it before, he might not be able to make it back into the NHL. Kessler underwent the same surgery in 2019, and he never played again. Jovanovski was the first to do it in 2013, and it took him a full year to rehab. He played 37 games after that, and then he retired. There also is an extended paragraph going over what exactly it was that Backstrom had to get surgically repaired, but I'm not a doctor. I don't know what the heck this stuff means. Hip resurfacing, femoral head, smooth metal covering, a damaged socket, metal shell. It's medical stuff. It's on the screen if you want to go ahead and read it, but that is the situation with Backstrom. And because this guy is still, or at least if you take away the injury, he still is good enough to play NHL caliber hockey, the Washington Capitals are in a pretty interesting spot when it comes to trying to fill up that hole at center. There are a few names that have been thrown around left and right in my YouTube chat, on social media, on Twitter, on Reddit, as to guys that could be potential replacements for Nick Backstrom. Now, I'm not going to go out there and say that whoever the Capitals get is going to be a 90, 100-point player, a 70, 80 assist guy, but you just need somebody to come in here and play that role. Not necessarily produce at the same numbers, and in fact, it's not like Backstrom was a 70, 80, 90-point guy recently anyway. He's kind of hovering around that 50, 60-point mark, which is definitely not bad. It's just not where he has been. Now, there are options thrown around there like Nazem Kadri, etc. There are a few other names that we can discuss as the weeks go on. But the name we're talking about here is one that we've been discussing a lot on the YouTube channel. It is Vancouver Canucks forward JT Miller, whose name has been surfacing in Washington Capitals conversations via Sekeres and Price, as well as via Elliotte Friedman. This is what Friedman said on the latest edition of the 32 Thoughts podcast. The JT Miller contract is probably not going to be in Vancouver. The next contract that he signs, that is, and that quite a few teams have shown interest, including the Washington Capitals. Here's another quote. According to Friedman, he doesn't understand why people didn't think the Miller situation would trend towards a trade. He's fascinated with the Capitals situation as well. Now, I know we have to talk about this every single time JT Miller is brought up on the channel, but the idea of trading Miller away is not because you're going to make the team better by trading him away today. It's that the Vancouver Canucks just simply won't be able to afford this guy, and you talk about the window of opportunity, taking a step back and allowing the team to gather some more assets and build a future that has a bigger window than what you could get if you kept Miller around for a year, you signed him, and you wanted to play some good hockey in the short term. Having some more assets from Miller that could be cheaper in totality could make this team better. It's just, what team is going to go out there and shell out those assets that the Canucks would want? That is where Washington comes in, and you start to think about, okay, if they need a player to replace Nick Backstrom, who is 34 years old, who is somewhat of a 50, let's say 60-point guy right now, JT Miller is a player that can come in and give them a lot more than what they got out of Backstrom. That's not disrespectful to the guy, that's just kind of talking about how things are right now. I mean, the guy's 34. He's not doing the same things that he was doing when he was getting 190 points on the year. Miller, on the other hand, is coming off of a fresh 99-point campaign, he's in the middle of his prime, and he is not even 30 yet, so there's a lot more time for this guy to be as good as he's going to be. If the Washington Capitals are going to be able to go out there and re-sign Miller to the big contract extension that he's probably going to get, then, hey, be my guest. Vancouver is just not in a position where they can consistently contend yet, I think, which is why they can't afford to make this kind of a signing. But if Washington wants to risk it, then go ahead. The problem comes with the assets in return, because if the Vancouver Canucks are going to go out there and expect, let's say, a trade price of a young forward, a prospect, as well as a top pick as well, the Caps don't really have too much of those that I feel like the Canucks would actually be interested in, especially when you consider the quantity and quality of the prospects they have in general. Sure, Hendrix Lapierre is good, Connor McMichael is good, but I do feel like other teams could go out there and potentially offer more, while also having their own desire for Miller as well. It's been kind of a growing sentiment that I've been seeing on Canucks Twitter that, okay, no, I don't want to trade with the Caps because the Caps don't have the assets the Canucks could actually use. This segment on the Sekeres and Price show goes over what Darren Dreger said about how he cannot imagine that Brian McClellan is going to leave the Nick Backstrom spot unfilled going into next season. And we have a tweet from Grady Sass, formerly of TSN and currently of the Sekeres and Price show, who discusses a potential idea that he's got floating around. Which Washington Capitals prospects would you want in a trade for Miller? Hendrix Lapierre or Connor McMichael plus Vincent Iorio is the starting point for me. Now, Lapierre is a guy that was absolutely dominant at the QMJHL level. Obviously, I think his last name being Lapierre makes things a lot more interesting for Canucks fans that were fans of the 2011 Cup run, as was I. But Lapierre is definitely a guy that if he pans out in the way that I think he could, he's going to definitely be a steal comparative to where he was drafted when he was taken 22nd overall in the 2020 draft. He showed off pretty well this previous season with the Acadie Bathurst Titan, and all we're looking for is for him to fully recover from all the stuff that he had gone through and make an impact at the AHL level when he makes his transition over there. Connor McMichael, on the other hand, was a guy that was one of the best Ontario Hockey League players in the entire season. He had 102 points in 52 games played in 2019-20, and he was just under a point per game in the AHL the season after that. Now, this season, he made the Capitals full-time. He had 68 games played, 18 points, 9 goals, 9 assists. There definitely is a lot more improvement to be had at the NHL level with Connor McMichael. It's just the fact that the guy is 21 years old, you know there's a lot more in the tank here when it comes to his long-term development. I'm gonna be honest, man, I didn't really think that McMichael had it in him to explode in the way that he did. He's kind of looking as an early steal at 25th overall in 2019 as well. It's just the next few years are gonna really determine if that's the case. Meanwhile, you have Vincent Iorio, a prospect that is also being discussed in this entire conversation here. As Grady said, he is a hometown guy from Coquitlam. He played with the WHL's Brandon Wheat this previous season where, in 60 games played, he had himself 44 points, 11 goals, 33 assists. He was a second-round pick by the Capitals back in the 2021 NHL Entry Draft, and it's pretty nice to see the improvements in overall point production that he exhibited heading into this season. Obviously, the Brandon Wheat Kings did not play all too much last year because of the shortened season, but as a hometown guy, as a right-handed defenseman, as a big one at that, there definitely is a lot of good qualities that I think Iorio has that can make him a valuable trade discussion piece as well. This is what the scouting report says on Elite Prospects. Iorio on the breakout is basically Han Solo with a blaster. Well-placed laser beam after well-placed laser beam. Wow, what a crazy way to open up your scouting report, eh? He misdirects opponents by looking relaxed, even vulnerable, before firing. He looks off his target, skates into the lane, then holds the deception until the puck's released, even for long-range, 3-line passes. He's a pretty good puck-moving defenseman, and so the Capitals giving up a package including these players, maybe even a pick as well, makes sense in my opinion if you want to talk about a JT Miller trade. It's just, you could definitely debate, are these assets enough? Because Miller is a 99-point player, Miller is all that, Miller was so good, and you could definitely argue that there are some other teams that might have more assets that would be more desirable. So, from Nick Backstrom to JT Miller, you can let me know your thoughts in the comments if you're a Capitals fan as well as if you're a Canucks fan. Is this an idea that you can get behind? If so, tell me in the comments why. If not, tell me as well why not. I hope you enjoyed this video, Trolls 99, and Bye.